Hello guys, welcome back to the Expensive Coins History channel. This video can change your life, please watch the full video. The story of hidden treasures often begins in the most ordinary places. A quiet drawer.
A dusty coinier.
A forgotten wallet tucked away in a cupboard. We tend to believe that history lives in museums, locked behind glass, guarded by velvet ropes. But sometimes, history sits silently in the palm of your hand, overlooked for decades, waiting for someone patient enough to recognize its voice. Today, we're stepping into the world of two seemingly ordinary American pennies, coins that millions of people once carried without a second thought. But behind their copper glow lies a mystery that has stunned collectors, shocked auctions, and changed the lives of those who discovered their true worth. And it all begins with a year many people barely remember when it comes to coins, 1975. The 1975 Lincoln penny does not announce itself with drama. It does not glitter like gold or shine like silver. At first glance, it looks like any other 1-cent coin, the kind that might slip through your fingers at a grocery counter or settle quietly into a parking meter decades ago. The familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln faces right, calm and dignified, just as it has since 1909. His expression carries the quiet weight of history, a reminder of resilience, leadership, and the enduring American story. But what makes the 1975 penny fascinating is not what it shows at first glance, but what it hides beneath the surface. To understand why this coin matters, you have to imagine the world in which it was born. The mid-1970s were a time of change in the United States. Inflation was rising, the economy was shifting, and everyday life carried a different rhythm than today. Coins were not collectibles back then. They were tools of daily survival. People counted pennies carefully. Every cent mattered. No one paused to examine the details of minting variations or subtle errors. These coins moved quickly from hand to hand, from cash registers to coat pockets, living fast lives in a world that never suspected their future value. The 1975 Lincoln cent was produced in massive numbers, minted primarily in Philadelphia and Denver. Millions upon millions of these coins entered circulation, blending seamlessly into the river of everyday commerce. And that is precisely what makes the rare examples so powerful today. When a coin is common, no one protects it. No one sets it aside. It lives hard, wears down, gathers scratches, and fades into anonymity. But once in a while, something unusual happens during the minting process. A subtle misalignment, a die anomaly, a microscopic variation that slips past quality control. And when that happens, an ordinary coin becomes something else entirely. Collectors often describe these moments as accidents frozen in metal. A split second at the mint, a machine slightly off, a die used just a little longer than it should have been. These tiny imperfections are invisible to the casual observer, but to trained eyes, they are like fingerprints left behind by history. And in the case of certain 1975 Lincoln pennies, those fingerprints have turned into legends whispered in collector circles. One of the most compelling aspects of the 1975 penny is how quietly its reputation grew. Unlike famous rare coins that entered the spotlight quickly, this one moved slowly, almost secretly, through the world of numismatics. For years, it remained a quiet discovery, recognized only by those deeply immersed in coin collecting. Conversations about it happened in hushed tones at coin shows, in handwritten notes between collectors, in small auctions where only a handful of people truly understood what they were seeing. It wasn't a coin that shouted. It was a coin that waited. And that waiting is part of what makes it so emotionally powerful today, especially for those who grew up during that era. If you were alive in the 1970s or early 1980s, you likely touched one of these pennies without realizing it. Maybe you used it to buy candy as a child. Maybe you received it as change at a gas station. Maybe it sat in a glass jar in your kitchen for years. The idea that something so ordinary could later become extraordinary carries a kind of quiet magic. It challenges the way we think about value, about time, about the objects that pass through our lives unnoticed. The Lincoln cent itself already carries deep symbolism. Introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, it was the first U.S. coin to feature a real historical figure. That decision changed American coinage forever. Lincoln became more than a president on metal. He became a daily presence in people's lives. Generations grew up seeing his profile every single day, often without thinking about it. The penny became a bridge between history and habit, between memory and motion. And the 1975 version continues that legacy, but with an added layer of mystery that only time could reveal. As collectors began to study surviving examples more closely, they noticed something unusual about certain 1975 pennies: their preservation, their strike quality, and in rare cases, subtle minting distinctions began to separate them from the sea of ordinary coins. These weren't coins that had simply survived. They had endured. Somehow, against all odds, a few had escaped the harsh wear of circulation. They retained their sharp details, their rich copper tone, their original brilliance. Finding one in such condition is like discovering a photograph from decades ago that still looks freshly printed. It creates an immediate emotional connection to the past. And that connection is powerful for viewers who understand the weight of time. By the age of 35, 45, or 65, you begin to feel how quickly decades pass. Objects from your youth take on new meaning. A song, a photograph, a coin. They stop being ordinary and start becoming anchors to memory. The 1975 penny sits right in that emotional space. It reminds people not just of money, but of moments, simpler days, slower conversations, a world before digital payments and contactless transactions, a world where coins had sound, weight, and presence. Another reason this coin has captivated serious collectors is the unpredictability of its discovery. Unlike coins that are locked away in vaults or museums, rare 1975 pennies can still, in theory, appear anywhere. That possibility fuels imagination. It turns every old coin jar into a treasure chest, every inherited collection into a mystery waiting to unfold. There's a thrill in knowing that history hasn't fully revealed itself yet, that somewhere, perhaps in a forgotten drawer, another remarkable example could still be waiting. Stories have surfaced over the years of people rediscovering old coins passed down through families, only to realize they were holding something far more valuable than expected. These moments are not just about money. They are about awakening. The sudden realization that something overlooked for decades carries a hidden story. That realization creates a ripple of emotion: surprise, disbelief, curiosity, and sometimes even nostalgia. Because when you hold a coin from 1975, you're not just holding metal. You're holding time compressed into a circle. What also makes the 1975 Lincoln penny so compelling is its quiet defiance of expectations. We live in a world that often equates value with size, with flash, with immediate visibility. But this coin proves the opposite. It shows that value can be subtle, that greatness can exist in the smallest forms, that even the most humble object can carry extraordinary significance if you look closely enough. And that idea resonates deeply with mature audiences who have lived long enough to understand that life's greatest treasures are often the ones that don't announce themselves loudly. There is also something poetic about how the penny itself has been treated over the years. Often dismissed, sometimes even abandoned, the 1-cent coin has faced debates about relevance and survival. Yet within that very coin lies stories powerful enough to command global attention. The 1975 penny stands as a quiet reminder that worth is not always measured by denomination. A single cent, overlooked by millions, can carry a legacy that outshines coins worth far more on paper. Collectors who specialize in Lincoln cents often speak about them with a kind of reverence. Not because of their metal content, but because of their continuity. Few coins have remained so consistent in design for so long, passing through the hands of generations. The 1975 issue sits right in the middle of that timeline, connecting early 20th century history with the modern era. It is both old and familiar, distant yet recognizable. And that balance gives it a unique emotional gravity. As interest in rare coins continues to grow, more people are beginning to revisit the pennies they once ignored. They look again at dates, at details, at subtle differences they never noticed before. And in that renewed curiosity, the 1975 Lincoln penny has found a new audience. Not just collectors, but storytellers, historians, and everyday people who are beginning to see coins not as spare change, but as fragments of living history. The beauty of this coin's story lies in its patience. It did not become fascinating overnight. It did not rely on hype or headlines. Instead, it allowed time to do the work. Decades passed, generations changed, and slowly, quietly, its significance deepened. That kind of slow-burning legacy is rare in today's fast-moving world. It reminds us that some stories are not meant to explode, they are meant to unfold. And perhaps that is why the 1975 Lincoln penny continues to capture imaginations today. Because it invites us to slow down, to look closer, to reconsider the things we once dismissed as ordinary. It challenges the assumption that value is always obvious. It whispers a simple but powerful truth. Sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries are the ones hiding in plain sight. If you've ever held onto old coins, if you've ever inherited a small collection, or even if you've simply kept a jar of spare change out of habit, the story of the 1975 penny carries a quiet invitation. Not an urgent call, not a loud demand, just an invitation to look again, to revisit the past with fresh eyes, to wonder what stories might still be waiting, silently resting in copper and time. And if the 1975 penny invites us to rediscover the past with curiosity, the 1981 Lincoln cent takes that invitation even further. Because by the time 1981 arrived, the world had already begun to change in ways that would reshape how we think about money, memory, and meaning. The early 1980s stood on the edge of a technological shift. Life was still analog, but the first signs of a digital future were quietly emerging. Yet coins, especially pennies, still lived at the center of everyday life. They clinked in pockets, rolled across kitchen tables, and filled the corners of piggy banks across America. The 1981 Lincoln penny carries a unique emotional weight because it belongs to a generation that remembers both worlds, the tactile past and the fast-moving present. It is a coin from a time when people still counted change carefully, when children saved pennies in jars, and when even the smallest denomination carried a sense of purpose. But like the 1975 penny, the true story of the 1981 cent does not reveal itself immediately. It waits beneath the surface, hidden in the details most people never thought to examine. At first glance, the 1981 penny looks almost identical to countless others. Abraham Lincoln's profile remains steady and familiar, unchanged in its quiet dignity. The reverse still carries the Lincoln Memorial, standing tall and symmetrical, a symbol of endurance and national identity. But what separates certain 1981 pennies from the ordinary is not their design. It is their moment in time. Because 1981 marked a transitional period in U.S. coinage, a subtle turning point that would soon lead to one of the biggest changes in the history of the penny. During this era, the cost of producing coins was becoming a serious concern. Rising metal prices were putting pressure on the mint, and the idea of changing the composition of the penny was already taking shape. While the full transition would arrive shortly after, the 1981 issues exist right at the edge of that transformation. That makes them historically significant, not just as coins, but as markers of a system preparing to evolve. They represent the last echoes of one era before another quietly took its place. For collectors, coins that sit at the boundary of change often carry a special kind of magnetism. They are not just objects. They are crossroads. The 1981 penny captures that feeling perfectly. It belongs to the final stretch of a long-standing tradition, minted during a time when few people realized how close they were to a turning point. And like many things in life, moments of transition often go unnoticed until years later, when hindsight reveals their importance. What makes certain 1981 pennies so fascinating today is the way rarity can emerge from subtlety. Not every valuable coin looks dramatic. Sometimes the most significant examples are the ones that survived against the odds, preserved in remarkable condition, protected from the wear and tear that erased so many others. A coin that remains sharp and radiant after decades carries an almost haunting quality. It feels untouched by time, like a memory frozen before it could fade. For viewers who have lived through multiple decades, that feeling resonates deeply. By midlife and beyond, you begin to understand how fragile preservation really is. Photographs fade, paper yellows, objects disappear. But every once in a while, something survives almost perfectly, and when it does, it creates a powerful emotional reaction. The 1981 Lincoln penny, in its finest preserved form, delivers exactly that kind of moment. It doesn't just represent money, it represents endurance. Another reason the 1981 penny holds such a strong emotional pull is its familiarity. Unlike rare gold coins or limited commemoratives, this was a coin people actually used. It passed through grocery lines, gas stations, and corner stores. It lived real lives. That familiarity creates a bridge between collectors and everyday people. You don't need specialized knowledge to feel its significance. All you need is memory. The memory of handling coins, of counting change, of a time when even small denominations felt tangible and real. There is also a quiet humility in the story of the 1981 penny. It reminds us that not everything valuable begins as something extraordinary. In fact, most things don't. They begin as ordinary, unnoticed, and uncelebrated. Value arrives later, shaped by time, rarity, and the stories we attach to objects. That transformation, from overlooked to extraordinary, is one of the most compelling themes in the world of coin collecting. And it's a theme that resonates far beyond coins themselves. Think about how often people hold onto small items without knowing why. Ticket stub, a faded photograph, a handwritten note. Years later, those items become priceless, not because of what they are made of, but because of what they represent. Coins work the same way. The 1981 penny is not just copper and zinc. It is a fragment of lived experience, a small circle carrying decades of silent witness. As collectors began paying closer attention to high-grade examples of 1981 pennies, something remarkable happened. The narrative began to shift. What was once dismissed as common started to gain recognition. Auction rooms, once quiet about such coins, began to notice them. Conversations grew, interest deepened, and slowly, the idea took hold that even late-date pennies could hold astonishing potential under the right conditions. This shift in perception is important, especially for audiences who appreciate long-term perspective, because it mirrors a broader truth about life itself. Value is not always immediate. Sometimes it takes years, even decades, for something to be fully understood. The 1981 penny embodies that idea. Teaches patience. It rewards attention. And it reminds us that time has a way of revealing what urgency cannot. There is also a sense of poetic symmetry when you place the 1975 and 1981 pennies side by side. Both are humble. Both were once overlooked. Both traveled through ordinary lives without ceremony. Yet both carry stories powerful enough to captivate collectors around the world. Together, they form a kind of quiet duet, two small coins echoing a larger truth about hidden value and rediscovered history. For those who grew up handling these coins, the realization can be deeply personal. It invites reflection. How many things in our lives have we overlooked simply because they seem too ordinary? How many stories have we walked past without noticing? The journey of these pennies encourages a different mindset, one that values attention, curiosity, and patience. And perhaps that is why stories like these resonate so strongly with mature audiences. Because by the time you've lived a few decades, you understand that life's most meaningful discoveries rarely come from noise. They come from stillness, from looking again, from noticing what others ignore. The 1981 penny doesn't shout for attention. It rewards those who are willing to slow down enough to see it clearly in a world that moves faster every year. There is something profoundly grounding about holding a coin that has outlived trends, technologies, and entire cultural shifts. It becomes more than an object. It becomes a witness, a quiet observer that has traveled through time without aging in the way people do. That perspective gives coins like the 1981 Lincoln Cent a unique emotional gravity. They connect generations without saying a word. And when we step back and look at the broader picture, the message becomes even clearer. The stories of the 1975 and 1981 pennies are not just about money. They are about awareness, about the power of looking closely at the ordinary, about recognizing that history does not always arrive in grand, dramatic forms. Sometimes, it arrives disguised as spare change. For collectors, these coins serve as reminders that the hunt for meaning is never truly over. There is always another drawer to open, another jar to examine, another forgotten envelope waiting quietly in the back of a closet. Each one carries the possibility of discovery. Not guaranteed, not predictable, but always possible. And that possibility is what keeps the passion alive. It also reshapes how we think about value itself. We often measure worth in immediate terms, numbers on a screen, prices in a moment. But coins like these challenge that mindset. They show us that value can grow silently, patiently, over time. That something small today can become extraordinary tomorrow. And that realization carries a certain wisdom, one that extends far beyond the world of collecting. As we bring this journey to a close, the emotional weight of these two coins becomes impossible to ignore. The 1975 Lincoln penny, once lost in the flood of everyday change, now stands as a symbol of hidden rarity and rediscovered significance. The 1981 Lincoln penny, born on the edge of transformation, carries the quiet power of a moment frozen just before history shifted direction. And here is where the story takes its most astonishing turn. Because while these coins may look ordinary to the untrained eye, their true value has shocked collectors around the world. Rare, exceptional examples of the 1975 Lincoln 1-cent penny have reached values as high as $149,000. Let that number settle in for a moment. A single cent, once passed from hand to hand without a second thought, now commanding a price that could change someone's life. And the story does not end there. The 1981 Lincoln 1-cent penny, preserved in extraordinary condition and recognized for its unique place in numismatic history, has reached values around $106,000. Another humble coin, another quiet witness to time, another reminder that the ordinary can hold unimaginable potential. Together, these two pennies carry a message that feels both surprising and deeply human. That value is not always visible at first glance. That time can transform the smallest objects into powerful symbols. And that sometimes, the greatest discoveries are not found in distant places, but in the simple things we already have. So the next time you hear the faint clink of coins in a drawer, or feel the familiar weight of a penny in your palm, pause for just a moment. Look closer, because hidden within that small circle of metal might be a story decades in the making. A story waiting patiently for someone willing to see beyond the ordinary and recognize the extraordinary within it.